Don't sell the fact. Don't do what everyone else does. Don't read the economics book of yesterday when you can read the economics book of tomorrow right on your TradingView screen. Today, we're going to go over the Fed cut rates and the market went down. That's curious. What's that about? I'll explain. You're also going to talk about, or we're also going to talk about silver again, how it looks like on charts it could go up only. We're going to talk about the Bitcoin chart specifically and about how there's a great DeMark bottoming signal there. All right. And then we're also going to talk about the difference between the December rate cut in 2025 and the December rate cut that got the big short going in 2007. Greenspan's Christmas cut, and everybody went, oh my God, and sold. That's what all the legacy guys want to do. Meanwhile, I'll tell you what they should be doing. But first, I'm your host, Bill Noble, and this is the Market Update. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about the show, right? The Fuzz Crypto says, did Powell just light the fuse for the blastoff? We'll talk about it. If you want to talk about liquidity, I actually have a graph where we can talk about liquidity. I know that's everyone's favorite word on Twitter, but I'm actually going to look at it. You know, we're actually going to go through something that Endgame Macro put together. It's a chart you can't miss. And then if you put it together with, say, a Bitcoin chart, a silver chart. Oh, and by the way, Francisco is going, anybody buy Zcash below 400? The bus is leaving. Here's an insane item, just a random insane item, and then I will explain. What happens if everybody in crypto that owns Bitcoin is long the wrong Bitcoin? Because there's a Bitcoin that's going to act like an altcoin, aka Zcash. And what happens if everyone in legacy who's long Nasdaq is long the wrong high-tech instrument? They should be long Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's going to move a lot faster than Nasdaq. Because as I like to tell people, Bitcoin has no earnings. Everyone's like, oh my God, a recession of this or that. Bitcoin has no earnings. And if you've got 60% of your portfolio in stocks, what do you think happens in a world where people go, I need 2%, 3%? I got a Gann model here that says 60% allocation to Bitcoin after the price action we saw yesterday. Naturally, not investment advice. So Bitcoin is like your new S&P. Zcash is your new Bitcoin. And I can't wait to see. I think Ethereum and XRP are just going to start following. It's either that or it's Dash. By the way, speaking of Dash, did you know that Dash is like a private Bitcoin? Very popular in a Latin American country where we just seized an oil tanker. Very popular currency used by many, many people down there. Also, the Bitcoin ETF is at 50. These nice little even numbers, right? Zcash at 400, Bitcoin ETF at 50. Now, Bitcoin. So we have a DeMark 13 bottom signal. I could show it to you, and you might get it, and you might not. But DeMark's work goes back way, way back, okay, to the 80s and the 90s, and is a favorite of all the legacy guys that have Bloomberg terminals. There is a bottom signal. It was kind of perking. It was just waiting for the final puke, which you got yesterday. Now let's talk about the final puke. I say when it comes to Fed meetings, payroll numbers, budget bills, speeches, any of these like, oh, it's a watershed moment. Okay. It's a watershed moment. Right. The first move off any of these events is wrong. It's wrong, right? In other words, something's wrong out there. Oh my God, sell the fact. The Fed's not cutting in 2026 or whatever the narrative is. Whatever the narrative is. Everyone's going to sell. Now, meanwhile, what they don't realize is the Fed has just started QE, right? The Fed is actually buying treasury bills and pushing money into the financial system, period. Full stop, right? They are doing QE. Now, of course, no one has thought to themselves about why they're doing QE. Is it because the economy is going to fall out of bed? Is it because the banks are going to fall out of bed? I think it has more to do with the banks. And I think this could also act as rocket fuel for silver. Now, if you want to talk about liquidity, let's talk about it. Okay. So I can share the tweet right here. All right. Now, this is a way that starts. This is the great financial crisis. So this is like low liquidity. And then here's where we are right now, right? This is the excess liquidity in the system. So as you can see, after they printed 14 trillion for COVID, right? You had lots of liquidity in the system. Now, down here in 2019, the Fed had to just literally get out the nuclear option and push so much money into the system to stop a problem of banks lending to each other, right? In other words, the Fed has only begun to push money into the system. This is 2012 over here, the iPhone, after 2 European debt crises, much like what's going on in Japan. Okay, this is what the Fed did. Whoosh, pushed all this money into the system. 2019, you had a problem with banks lending to each other. Whoosh, of course, exacerbated by cough, cold, and flu. So here we are sitting in this low liquidity environment. And the Federal Reserve just came out and says, hey, guys, just quietly, we're just going to do a few treasury bills. We're going to, buy some short-term government bonds and push money in the system. Yeah. Now, check this out. You don't have enough money in the system, okay, which, can cause a damper on Bitcoin, but Uncle Sugar has to refinance $8.6 trillion in debt next year. What does that mean? That means Uncle Sugar has to find somebody in the government bond market to buy $8 trillion worth of bonds next year. Do you want to buy an IOU from somebody who owes 40 trillion? Probably not, which is why they have to get stablecoin companies up and running. They're going to have to do the Genius Act. I mean, this is not funny now. They have to do this. This is why the Fed has restarted QE. It's like the first leg of a tidal wave. It's the first little wave. And then literally the Fed is going to come in with a tidal wave of money. Now, I'm not surprised that whatever the crypto market is doing is either a repeat of December of 2007, where everybody goes, oh my God, they've admitted there's a problem. Now, of course, back then, there were similar issues in the banking system. I think the difference is back then, they didn't have the QE mechanism right away, and Greenspan was way late in terms of cutting rates. These characters at least have been cutting for a while. Now they're just immediately starting printing. They're not even waiting for the problem to show up. Greenspan back in 2007 waited until March for the first bank to fail, and then they didn't do anything for another 6 months. Now they're all over it. They're actually printing and pushing. So you have silver going up. That's going to put pressure on banks. Pressure on banks means pressure on the Fed. I just showed you what happens when you get, liquidity at low levels. What happens when the Fed really comes in? Like, what's the difference between the debt crisis today and the debt crisis back in Europe in 2011? Japan versus them, it's the same thing. It looks like their interest rates and their bonds are going to go to zero. So what's the Fed going to do? They're going to just come in. They're going to come in massively. And not only are they going to come in, they're just going to keep going. They're not going to have to announce it at meetings like this one. This was the little bitty announcement. What they really meant to tell you is they're going to start a tidal wave of money. And of course, everybody is going to sell Bitcoin today because everybody might sell Nasdaq, or they're going to run all the stops. I mean, Michael Saylor, I think the entire institutional world is standing down there below 90K going, please sell us the Bitcoin. I think sovereigns are down there. Now, I guess if you're watching this 2 days from now and Bitcoin's at 86K and I have egg all over my face, fine. But why would I? Why would I? I mean, Zcash up 10% overnight. Zcash was below 400 for about 5 minutes before people just scooped it up. Why would that not be a leading indicator for Bitcoin? And even if Bitcoin doesn't move, Zcash can move all on its lonesome. Zcash is encrypted Bitcoin, and it can go to top 5. You want alt season? It could be a 1-coin alt season. 2 coins, 3 coins if you include XRP and ETH, which are still wildly underpriced. And look at this. They are selling ETH at 3,200, which is exactly where ETH was right before FTX. The problem, whatever problem there is out there, if there's an FTX, there's a problem with people gambling with Nvidia chips, believe it or not. That's not happening in crypto. So anything you add to this like government refinancing, bank strain, which I talked about yesterday, anybody who could lose money, there is no sign of a top on charts in silver. I think I said everything yesterday about silver except that. You got bottom signals in Bitcoin and no sign of a top in silver. None. And silver's up today, and for some stupid reason, we're all selling. The first move is always wrong, and I don't care if this first move lasts all day because they've started QE. The bond market in the United States and Japan is not freaking out. It's not freaking out at all. So what exactly is our problem? Well, I'll tell you exactly what our problem is in crypto is that they're running the stops today. Like sometimes when the market goes down, I can create reasons like, well, maybe it's hedge funds selling Bitcoin because they're unwinding this MicroStrategy trade thing they do. This feels like, oh, it didn't go up, so let's just hit it. Now, the algorithms do that naturally, right? It's like, oh, it didn't go up, or it wasn't the news that they wanted about infinite rate cuts next year. But I don't think the algorithms were ready to read a restart of QE. They're calling it non-QE QE. Okay. I'm old enough to know that when they start this, just like when they started it in 2008, everyone's like, well, it's going to end soon. It's going to end soon. And as soon as they tried to end it, the equity stock market lost its mind. And then Bernanke came out at Jackson Hole, Wyoming, had a 3-martini lunch and just came out and said, yeah, we're doing QE forever. We're doing $85 billion a month indefinitely. And they did it for like 7 years. So they started, then they said they were going to stop it. Everyone freaked out. And then they said, we're doing it forever. And then people are looking at this announcement yesterday and selling. I'm like, this may be like the dumbest thing I've ever seen. It is the ultimate poster boy for the first move is always, always, always wrong. Because it's done by algos who read headlines. And then you got guys pushing stops, standing down there below 90K. Now, of course, to be fair, your bags are down. Alts are down 5%. Cardano's down 8%. Sui's down 4%. Everyone's bags. Everyone's wrecked. No one wants to touch it. And I understand that. And that's going to stay that way right up until the point where people understand what's really happening here. Because you know what? If there was really a problem, say like 2007 or 2008, where, the Fed couldn't do what I call proactive printing, you would have equities and probably bonds a lot lower. You would have a big freak out trade in legacy. And I continue to believe everyone in legacy is looking for the big short. They're all looking to get short Nvidia and they're looking to get short all these other stocks. That's fine, right? But if you're going to get short anything, it would be a bank. And as I sort of hinted at in the graph, when that liquidity measure was low in 2019, like this is just, talking about regular life, right? like when everyone freaked out, when the banking system didn't function properly right here, the Fed just came in and it was a vertical tidal wave of money. It was a vertical tidal wave of money after this European debt crisis. The Fed was just like, we're not doing this again. We're not. We're not going to sit around and let, country A or country B sink the world. It cannot happen at Christmas. It cannot happen to our banks, right? It just cannot happen. Because if they let it go like they did in 2007, they won't be able to print their way out of it. So they're going to print their way out of it now. And again, everyone sells Bitcoin. Absolutely, absolutely insane. And you know what? Zcash is making my job a lot easier. Even if they do some kind of stupid wick today, I'm still fine with it. Now, what also may happen, and the market's done this a couple times, it'll just leave it here down 2%. It'll just leave it here. Just let you sit and look at it and look at the red ink and look at Solana down 3% at $131. XRP at $2, by the way, $2.01. Looking at everything at all these even numbers as you ask yourself, is this not exactly what Satoshi wrote about in the Bitcoin white paper? It's when banks, or central banks rather, have no choice but to push massive amounts of money into the system. At the same time, ground beef prices, funny, not funny, are moving like altcoins. Ground beef prices, look at the long-term chart, like 10 years. It's bottom left to top right. It's banana zone parabolic. It's just uncontrollable. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for that, but the common man is undoubtedly looking at the fact that, he can only eat beef now, as in hamburger, on Christmas and Easter, and everything else is chicken and cheese. When you start thinking about this and you start thinking about what normies are going to do when they just pick up the phone and hit the green button, because they just look at all this and go, yeah, this doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work anymore. And the amount of money that they're going to have to push into the system is going to make the $2 trillion that the orange man had to spend, like the deficit spending that he had to do. I don't know, man. It's going to look like kid stuff. And what's even more amazing, and I did talk about this somewhat yesterday, although I got a little hate for it, but it was strange because I didn't explain it correctly, is that you had one of the most bullish banks in crypto, the original bullish bank, Standard Chartered, right? A European bank, not well known until they started writing about crypto, right? And they thought Bitcoin was going to 300,000 next year, and now they've reduced their target to 150. Now, let's just talk about 150K Bitcoin for just a second. How would that happen? How does 150K Bitcoin happen now? Well, it's very simple. Very simple, right? You have a spike in silver and someone loses money. And then banks won't lend to each other no matter how much money the Fed puts in. So they have to get the bazooka out. Because if you go back to the 2019 chart, I'm not going to get into the weeds. That problem in 2019 where banks didn't want to lend to each other, that didn't get fixed overnight. I mean, they had to put a large amount of money in to eventually fix it. But that situation persisted. I don't think they can let that situation persist if somebody out there loses a lot of money in silver, say. Or I don't know, there's just normal asset allocation from one place like equities to another, as in Bitcoin. It's like you as a crypto head don't own the right Bitcoin, and the people in S&P should own Bitcoin. And I mean, this at a time when investment banks are lowering expectations, their long-term target is 150, and sometimes when you have an investment bank say, this is our new 12-month target, it winds up being their new 12-day, 12-week, right? Target where the market just goes there. It's like a target that the market goes, oh yeah, let's Let's aim for 150, right? The guys that think it's going to 300 don't like it anymore. And you know what's really funny is, even though I'm just like small YouTuber, you have a guy named Tom Lee who bought a whole bunch of ETH at 4,000, who's now on TV every day saying the same thing as Raoul Pal does about Bitcoin, namely that when you build things, Bitcoin usually does better. It's called the ISM index. And I realized that when Tom Lee started parroting Raoul Pal, it's like the bullish guy has run out of original arguments. That's one thing I'll have to say about Saylor. He never runs out of original arguments. He was reminding everybody at this Bitcoin conference in Abu Dhabi that, that the current administration is very into Bitcoin. Like they're building a mechanism to have a strategic Bitcoin reserve for real. And I'm not talking about like a thumb drive on the orange man's desk. I'm talking about the Fort Knox of Bitcoin. It's being built, and you're not hearing about this anywhere. You're hearing Michael Saylor say it, but you're not hearing anybody else. All the other bullish people are kind of, it's getting hard to be bullish. I'm not going to lie, right? However, if you read a technical analysis textbook, when should you be bullish? When it's up only, or when it looks like it's going to snap and go to zero? Because boy, doesn't it look like it's going to snap and go to zero today, right? Fed rate cut. Oh my God. Sell the fact 90K, right? Right on the nose. We're all going to stare at each other. Meanwhile, as one hedge fund guy and he said this at 80K, and good for him, I'm going to tell him when I see him again, the fundamentals have never been better. The fundamentals have never been better. And the thing that marries, the fundamentals have never been better, full stop. The technical analysis on some altcoins like Sui and Solana on a weekly chart have never been better. This is like the base, the bottom end of the range for all these big cryptos. And man, did they absolutely smack the market yesterday. A Zcash statistic you haven't heard. Check this out for anybody joining us late there on TikTok and YouTube. So if you look at Bitcoin, right, if you take out the stable coins, Bitcoin is worth 65% of the cryptocurrency market cap. So Bitcoin is so big, it's 65% of the overall market, right? Now, want to guess what that number is for Zcash? Encrypted Bitcoin? Are you ready? Zcash is 0.24% of the cryptocurrency market cap. 0.24%. So Bitcoin is 65K, is 65% of the total market, and encrypted Bitcoin is 0.24%. Now, it doesn't take out the stable coins, but that's Zcash dominance, ZEC.D. I even think Ethereum dominance at 12%. Again, that's not taking out the stable coins, but still, right? All coins are a joke in terms of how cheap they are. Now, of course, that's going to require massive Bitcoin stability, obviously, right? And I don't see any reason to sell below 90 other than the fact that they're trying to scare you again. They really are. Like last time they were trying to they had Bitcoin that they could sell, miners would sell and hedge funds would sell. It wasn't personal against you. It wasn't manipulation. It was just more sellers than buyers. This feels like a stop fishing exercise. Like, let's lean on Nasdaq. Let's distract everybody. And one thing that we put in Patreon, by the way, is we got two things in Patreon. We got a Zcash roadmap, right? And I'll tell you right now, Zcash deviated from the Zcash roadmap for about 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Sit here every day. We have an estimated close for Zcash in the platinum area. This thing deviated from that roadmap for about 10 minutes. Boom, the other way. Now, the other thing, if Nasdaq doesn't crash, right? If Nasdaq doesn't crash, I think you got to start looking at Bitcoin mining stocks. Some of these mining stocks, some of them have energy efficiency. Some of them have rented out space to AI companies. That's an oversimplification. We've got the report. Actually, that's for the middle tier and platinum in Patreon. Hey, folks, everybody thinks that, Bitcoin miners and MicroStrategy is all done. Man, I don't think so. Especially if there's a real reason for Bitcoin to go higher and you don't have an equities crash. I mean, right now, Bitcoin is down more than stonks. If there's a problem in the world, it should be in stonks, not in Bitcoin. Now, the problem in Bitcoin is, again, the idea that you have to own it hasn't hit yet. Everybody is still leverage day trading, right? You think the Fed's going to cut rates, you get long at 94. Everybody gets long at 94, and then they drop it to 90. And then everybody thinks it's going to 86, and they go back and forth just liquidating everybody. And that's what's been going on. This has been a P&L destruction event for 11 months and 11 days, all year long. And this is another point about Bitcoin, about where this thing could go. Like, how did crypto work out for you this year? Like, what actually happened? Crypto stocks pivoted towards AI. The crypto stocks 10x. Your bags did nothing. The indignity of it all. Bitcoin treasury companies bought Bitcoin with Bitcoin not mooning. The stonks went up 10x because they were on Robinhood, and then the stocks came all the way down and crypto crashed. What exactly has happened this year that matches up with the narrative of long Bitcoin, short the banks, of Bitcoin being the ultimate reserve alternative money with gold and silver, with every catalyst in human history, including the Fed restarting QE? I mean, do you realize that last Fed meeting, people don't get this. Last Fed meeting, October, Powell came out and said, we are absolutely, definitely not cutting rates. Get out of my face. We're not doing it. I mean, rates, odds of a December rate cut in poly market and implied through market mechanisms was like zero. Then all of a sudden you woke up for whatever reason we don't know. Maybe it's just like the chirpings in the job market. And the next thing you know, Powell's cutting rates. He went from not cutting rates, from being the grumpy old man, right, that got this whole decline started. And the next thing you know, boom, he's cutting rates. And he's doing QE. He's doing QE. Like, the whole story was, well, on December 1st, we're going to stop tightening. We're going to stop QT. We're going to stop draining money out of the system. Yeah, Jerome, that would be a really good idea. That was the story. Now the story is we're doing QE and we're selling. So October was you'll get nothing and like it. And December was like you have everything and the promise of more. The promise of more, right? I mean, yesterday was kind of like, I don't know, kind of like maybe a shrimp cocktail. It's the shrimp cocktail before the beautiful dinner. Yeah, it's only like 3 or 4 shrimp. But if someone gives you a shrimp cocktail, what normally follows? I don't know. Back in my day, it was like a big steak dinner or a holiday meal, smiling and happiness. I know that's tough to bring up in your mind, okay? But smiling and happiness. They gave you everything you wanted, and they're like, you know what? I'm selling. Okay. And they may do it all day, and it'll probably look terrible. And you'll have 89K Bitcoin or 88 or whatever they're going to do. The first move is always wrong. The first move, especially in like the broader market. Now, I don't think that this move in Zcash is wrong. I don't. Right? Zcash is telling you, because it's the only thing that's green on the board, along with Dash, that when this thing turns around, it's going to be a volcano. It is. Because the Fed has to push massive, massive, massive amounts of money into the system. Or you're going to have serious problems. I mean, I guess the Fed can sit around and watch it all melt down at Christmas, but Why would they? I keep saying this. Like, why would they let it melt down when they just snuck all this stuff in? They went from not cutting rates to cutting rates and QE, but it's really not QE. It's really not. Right? Don't let's call it something else. They did this in 2019. Let's call it something else. I have a feeling this new Fed chairman's going to come in May, and well before that, and he's just going to come out like Bernanke and said, "Yeah, we're doing $100 billion a month indefinitely." I don't see how else you support the overall market. How else does it work? Like finance, that is, right? The broader system. And there's no better time to get outside the system, reminding you that for all you stonk friends, Bitcoin has no earnings. Right? That used to be a negative. Now it's a positive because for whatever reason they're selling the fact here, they're missing the point. There's no such thing as a little QE. There's no such thing as a little sugar. What? You're only going to have one Dorito? You're only going to have one cookie, right? You're going to buy a whole package of Oreos. You're just going to eat just one. Yeah, okay. Never works that way with sugar. Once they start giving the market sugar, the market's going to demand it continues on and on and on. And that brings me to the marvel of 90K Bitcoin. You realize that the 2021 high was like 70 and Bitcoin actually hit 77 this year, and it's currently sitting at 90. And I don't know about you, unless I'm stupid, the longer I sit here and it looks at 90, particularly when they do these 80 prints, the cheaper it looks. The cheaper it's going to look to Michael Saylor, the cheaper it's going to look to BlackRock. By the way, final note here. I was on LinkedIn today. Guess who's hiring for head of digital asset research? That's right. Your friendly neighborhood spider people, BlackRock. BlackRock is looking for a head of digital asset research, who then creates a digital asset research team, which will undoubtedly do analysis of the market, obviously, and also probably promote a lot of BlackRock's partnerships, tokenized securities, like covering tokenized assets. So if they got the head of research queued up, what else do they have queued up that the research person is going to write about? What? BlackRock needs to hire somebody to do Bitcoin TA? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think BlackRock is sitting on a giant pipeline of tokenized products. And when they announce that they're hiring a director of research, as Crypto Ninny Fest is, they're just all selling all at once. Okay, that is the philosophy. You could have 105, you could have 137, and you could even have 180. And you could have it now, or you could have it by mid-January. Now, if you want more details as to how all that happens, we're going to be covering it in Patreon and on the YouTube member podcast in the next day or so, where we will tell you, without giving investment advice, what to do next. And if that's not in your price point, don't forget to hit the like button. On the way out, we will see you tomorrow.